We are glad today on Pod Have Mercy to have Eric Soard. Eric is right now Executive Director of Wesley College Foundation, which is from, now how do I say this, Mwanza?
Yep, Mwanza.
Mwanza, Tanzania. And for those of you who may not know, that Jeff, our rock and roll producer, and I are going to Tanzania.
I take issue at this already.
In the middle of May. You were not invited.
I realize that.
Right now, when
as
you
I'm
found
sitting
out,
here,
wait, I'm not going?
Pod Have Mercy will be going to Tanzania, except for Matt.
Well, we have a limited budget.
Yeah.
And so we couldn't take everybody.
I know how to hold a camera. I can hold a camera all day long.
I already have
John.
somebody to do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're going to Tanzania. We're going to be visiting some sites. Eric, you, for people who may not know, are an ordained deacon in the Memphis Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church, which you also served 10 years, is that right, as a missionary in Tanzania. One of the things we like to talk to people a lot about is kind of how they ended up doing what they do. I think that's like a great first question. How in the world do you end up as a missionary in Tanzania? Most people probably don't even know where on the continent of Africa Tanzania is.
Well, and occasionally people get it mixed up with Tasmania and actually get the wrong continent.
They get
so
Australia.
That does happen on occasion. It's funny you say that, partly because my wife just walked in the door. But so this was something that my wife always wanted to do, always felt called to. She wanted to. She grew up around Heifer Project International, their farm in Perryville, Arkansas, and part of her childhood was meeting people from all over the world who had come to get training in livestock and farming.
Oh wow!
And so she grew up experiencing that diversity and experiencing what it looked like to interact with and help people from different parts of the world. And so when we finished college, she really wanted to see what that would look like. And so we originally went to Tanzania with the intention of spending 4 months working at an orphanage there in Tanzania. And 4 months turned into a year turned into 2 years. At the end of 2 years, we were like, we're just going to be sticking around until we don't anymore. And so we ended up in Tanzania for 10 years.
Why Tanzania? I mean, how did that get on the radar?
Yeah,
like you throw a dart. Did you get a globe and you spun it and you just threw the dart?
No, not even that cool. It was more of a bureaucratic paperwork kind of thing. We went through UMVM, United Methodist Volunteers and Missions.
Yeah, look at that.
And when we were looking at, we knew we wanted Africa, and we knew we wanted to work with children. And there were 2 places available. One was teaching English in the Congo, and one was being a house parent at an orphanage in Tanzania. And not feeling qualified to teach English. Some people would say maybe not qualified to speak English, but definitely not qualified to teach English.
That's because you're from Tennessee.
The second one.
So you chose the second one. So, but I mean, a heart for the children, I assume, was versus teaching.
Hates children, loves teaching.
Yeah. Heart for the kids, heart for the community there. Really excited with the idea that we could come in and just provide a great environment for the kids. That was really the goal, was how can we create a good, safe environment for the kids, and making sure that they were getting what they needed. And what kind of happened, what kept moving our timeline farther forward, was realizing how much we were falling in love with them, how much they were falling in love with us, and that the community around us. I had been a youth director for 5 years before that. And I knew several more youth directors in the U.S. The specifically community we were in, though, there in Tarime at the time, didn't really have a lot of people coming to it. It was a very rural, very underdeveloped part of Tanzania. And kind of a hallmark of all 10 years there, including getting Wesley College started, was really looking around and saying, there's this need, and I think I can fill it. And so it was kind of 10 years from being a house parent in an orphanage where there were not a lot of volunteers and people coming. It's amazing sometimes how many missionaries get called to like Cape Town, South Africa, or the Bahamas or certain places like that.
Bring it.
Tree Tanzania is not on a lot of people's list.
I have been called to the Bordeaux region of France, and I
They
haven't
just
done
keep
anything
rejecting
about
your
it.
passport.
Yeah. No, I get it. I remember years
Yeah,
ago there
yeah.
was a friend of mine, who'd take a mission trip. We're going on a mission trip to, Guatemala. We're going on a mission trip to Africa. And this guy took a mission trip to France. And all I could think of is like, it's just a boondoggle.
Wait a minute.
But I mean,
minute.
Yeah.
Right? You
So I
think.
always thought that'd be good.
Yeah.
So you were y'all were house parents. Was that mostly what you did for the 10 years, or did you do other things?
No, that only lasted about a year. And then the organization we were with at the time that we were volunteering with started working on a secondary school for the kids in the orphanage and in the community. So our second year in Tanzania was largely around getting a secondary school started. So we were able to do that, got it registered, and got it up and running. And then during that time, we accidentally started a church.
I love that, accidentally.
We're worshiping with kids in the orphanage, and people just started showing up. And one day, somebody approached me, one of the adults from the village approached me and said, "How can I join your church?" And I was like, What church? Like, we're just, it's a Sunday morning, we've got a choir, and I give a small message, and we're just meeting and hanging out. We don't have members. We don't have, we're Methodists. We don't have any committees. So clearly this can't be a church because there's no committee structure to it. And they were like, "No, we want to join your church." And so I said, "Okay." And so the next Sunday I said, "If anybody is interested in getting baptized, come up afterwards and let me know, and we'll organize a baptism." And we had about 30 people come up. And so my father-in-law came over. He was a Methodist pastor, and did our first baptism. We had about 40 people baptized on a Sunday. And this was in 2011. We kept growing. About 6 months later, we baptized another 96 people. And we had a 200-member church in a village that had only had one Catholic church for forever. And only had at the time maybe 1,500, 1,700 people in it. We had 200 in our church on a Sunday. Never advertised it, never intended to start a church, never set out with that in mind. We were just meeting on Sundays and meeting people where they were and trying to teach them and trying to minister to them. And so some conference leaders from within Tanzania showed up, and they said, "Do you want to do this full time? And we want you to do this in other places." And I tried to convince them that I didn't know how I had done it the first time. And so there wasn't a whole lot there to repeat. And they said, no, we want you to do this again. And so in 2012, my wife and I were commissioned as missionaries with Global Ministries and started working in church planting.
That's awesome. Now, I read here, like, you started a bunch of churches, planted 15?
About 15.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So you're planting more than one a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was 15 churches in about 4 years.
Whoa.
So from 2012 to 2016, and some of those I would directly pastor and work with. A lot of those, we would plant a church, and we would be working with people, and somebody would come up from that church and say, "I feel called to plant another church," or "I've got a family member or I've got a friend and they've wanted a church in their area for a long time." So not all of them, but many of the churches we planted were the first church or the only church in that village.
Wow.
In that area. And so they'd say, we had people that were sometimes traveling an hour or more by bicycle or on foot on Sunday morning to go to a church because they didn't have anything closer to home. And so they would ask us to come in and plant a church closer to where they were for their community. And so that's how a lot of those got started.
So one of the things people may not know, I know I've become close with Bishop Muyombo, who is over parts of Congo and Tanzania. And I think people don't understand the scope of the size of the place. Like, Tanzania, you may not hear about it, so you think, oh, it must be the size of like Houston, Texas, or something. Or I mean, how big is Tanzania?
Yeah, Tanzania is 50% larger than the state of Texas.
So
So it covers a large area. 60 million people total population. Mwanza, which is where Wesley College is, has about 3 million people. Now, the first first town we lived in and worked in was 10,000. A lot of the villages I planted churches in would have been 1,500 to 2,000. But we planted about 5 churches in Mwanza during a 2-year time span, and Mwanza's got about 3 million people.
3 million people. That's
Dude.
amazing. And it's up on the lake.
Right on Lake Victoria.
Yeah. I had no idea where we were going. I saw the itinerary that they sent and pulled the map up, and I'm like, that's nowhere close to where we're going. I mean, that's a long way. We have to fly.
Right, yeah. By bus, or by car, it's a whole nother. From Dar es Salaam, which is where you'll land initially, to Mwanza is anywhere from an 18-hour to 20-hour car ride.
Yeah, we're not doing that, Jeff.
No,
We're taking Air Tanzania.
Let's go.
much preferred.
Yeah, here have
much
good
recommended.
snacks. Air Tanzania has good snacks. So the Our Father's House, you started an organization for street kids. That was it was Tarime, is that what it's called? Tarime, and that's where you started.
Correct.
And was that the organization that came out of the work that you were doing with the kids?
Came out of the local churches. So the second church we ever planted was in Tarime, and we rented a building. As I said, my entire ministry has kind of just been plugging holes as they come up, and so we had rented a building to start the church in, and the local pastor who I was working and empowering and working with at the time showed up early one Sunday morning, and these kids were out front, and they were rolling up their cardboard and their bedding and things like that. And he started talking to them and found out that they slept in front of the building we were using as a church every night. And so we just invited them inside, and we started making tea and kind of Tanzanian equivalent of donuts. They're called mandazi. And we would just make those every Sunday, and we would serve them a little meal, and then they would join us for worship. And then we started developing relationships with them, and we found out most of them were not orphans. They had families. They had run away from home because there wasn't enough food, because their parents had gotten remarried and a step parent hadn't welcomed them, because they thought that maybe life would be better away from home. Rural life is hard. Rural farm life in Tanzania, very difficult. For whatever reason, most of them had family somewhere of some kind, but they ended up on the street. And so instead of starting an orphanage, which we had experience with that, we didn't start the one we worked in, but we had experience with working in one. We didn't want to encourage more kids to end up in an institution. And so what Our Father's House actually does is work on reuniting street kids with their families. So at this point, they've been going for, I don't know, 10 years now probably, and have gotten 120, 150 kids off the streets during that time period. But it started just out of that local church. There was 2 or 3 of us, and when somebody had a day off, we would meet with the street kids and work with them and talk with them and play games, build relationships. When they were ready to tell us about their family and tell us about their history, we would find out more, and we would eventually connect with their families and work with them about why they had run away, and get them reunited. And as we grew, it became a little more formalized. We started Our Father's House, and that turned into supporting them in school, or supporting them with a mattress to sleep on, or food, just making home a little more comfortable, doing more follow-up and parental training and family engagement, whatever we could do to make home safe and secure and more attractive than what living on the streets look like for them. Mm-hmm. And so they don't have it's not an orphanage, they don't have a children's center. Kids back into a safe, secure home of their own with their family or with a foster family if their family, truly isn't available.
Now, it also says here that you were involved in women's advocacy. There was an Emmanuel Center for Women and Children. Talk about the need to advocate for women, the importance of that in Tanzania.
And I will say Tanzania, officially and formally, if you look at like a government perspective or something like that, does talk about gender balance. And there's not a legal oppression or a legal separation professionally or educationally. Women are welcome in all levels of education and all levels of government. Tanzania has a female president right now. So there is that on an official kind of level. But in Tanzania, almost everything operates kind of in two different spectrums at the same time: the official, formal, and the traditional. And traditionally, a lot of structures and systems are created to keep women in a certain place and in a certain space. In that particular area where Emmanuel Center is, the Korea tribe still practices FGM, still practices a lot of traditional
For people who don't know what FGM is,
Don't go look it up.
well, we can.
It stands for female genital mutilation. So female circumcision is another kind of way to put it, but it's harsher than that. I think sometimes when you say female circumcision, it doesn't sound as bad as it actually is in practice. And that's a practice. It's not just about a medical practice or a health practice. There's a lot of culture tied to that is oppressive in nature, intentionally so, controlling in nature. And so that particular area, that particular tribe has one of the highest rates in the country for domestic violence, has one of the highest rates in the country for FGM. They're not the only ones that practice it in Tanzania, but they do have a high rate, which also relates to a high rate of child marriage, a lack of education, because a lot of times once young girls finish primary school, they're not given the same opportunity in high school that their male counterparts are. They're expected to get married, to start a family, because their families can make money off of that through the dowry system and process.
Wow.
And so our local church was experiencing a lot of that. We had a lot of women coming to church who, we had a few women coming to church that were being punished for being part of the church, or were being punished at home for coming to Bible study or coming to prayer group because they were out too late, or they weren't getting things done in the home that they were supposed to. We had women that were getting trapped in marriages where they were not there by choice, but were stuck because they had no economic independence, no ability to save money and own property because their husband controlled all of their economic influence. And so that created a circumstance that the church just said, this is not how it's supposed to be. This is not what it's supposed to look like. This is not what a loving community looks like. That trickles down to the family. So that trickles down to how children are treated. It trickles down to how male and female children are treated. And so it was really about trying to establish more peaceful homes. But to do that, you have to be able to empower people to kind of, it's their home, it's their house. You can't police everything that goes on, and you can't, you're not gonna be able to change everyone's hearts at the same time. So it was really about empowering the women in that community to start to create for themselves the lives that they were looking for. One of the amazing things that's come out of that this past December, the Emmanuel Center, Gamasara United Methodist Church, and Wesley College graduates were able to get together and put on the third annual girls camp. So during the time of circumcision, because it's a ritual time every year, during the time of circumcision, they brought, this year I think it was around 300 girls together, and they stayed in the church and around the church. They cooked meals together. They played together. They also did seminars and training around FGM. They did seminars and training around vocation and calling. What does it mean to be a godly young woman? What does it mean to have that relationship with Christ? What does it mean to be a sacred human being of sacred worth? And getting to pour into 300 young girls in this community. Because building up their self-worth and building up their understanding of themselves is one of the best defenses that we can have.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because it's hard to oppress people who understand who they are and understand whose they are.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the work that was done in the Emmanuel Center from the very beginning to now was really about giving agency to people to be able to say, we have the ability to chart our own lives. And that's really a lot of what it's about.
Well, let's talk about Wesley College. Yeah. So this is a school that you helped start in 2017 in Mwanza, and it's one that we're going to visit there. Tell us about the birth of that and what the school is and what need it was meeting and what it does and all that good stuff.
Yeah. And so, and this kind of started out of 7 years of church planting, community development, orphan care, street children care. We were in Tanzania doing all of that for about 7 years, and realized like we can keep doing that village to village, person to person. There's nothing wrong with that. But the local leaders we were empowering, once empowered, were much more effective at some of that work than we were. They were more effective at evangelism. They were more effective at mobilizing their own people. They were more effective at leading change in their community. It's just they needed some of the skill sets and capacity to be able to do that. And so that's where Wesley College was created. It was really created from day one to educate servant leaders for the church and the community, to say, how can we empower these leaders who have amazing calls and visions for their community and for their church, and give them the skills and tools that they need to be able to go out and do what they're called to do. And so we knew right away we were not trying to create a premier university, nothing wrong with that. But what Wesley College has really become is a kind of a community college model, what we refer to it as a bridge college, to say we're taking people who would have never considered themselves college students and getting them to college, making college accessible for them, and making sure that they can succeed in that academic environment, and then preparing them to go on to whatever the next step is. It may be higher education and a bachelor's degree. We stop at an advanced diploma, which is kind of like an associate's degree. So many of our students go on to other places to get a bachelor's degree. Some of them go on to get jobs, start businesses, plant churches, be ordained as pastors. But we're taking this group of students, kind of the middle 50% of high school graduates. The top 25% are going straight on to university, but the kind of the middle 50% of high school graduates, and saying, how can we help you get to the next step in the life that you're looking at? So we started in 2017 with just theology students. We had about 20 students that were studying theology, and we've added community development. We've added business. We've added social work. We're not right now averaging and running about 250 students a year. Our goal is eventually to get to 2,500, 3,000 students a year as we eventually grow and expand. And we really, again, are just focused on how can we build capacity, not just give you that piece of paper, but give you the ability to go out into the world and make the difference and the change that you want to see made.
Mm-hmm. Is it a residency program, or is it draw from people come cars, buses to get there?
We do a little bit of both. I would say we have, out of the 250 students, we have about 100 that are from outside of Mwanza that live in hostels, kind of rent hostels year to year, and then we have about 150 students on average that are from the surrounding area, or have family in the surrounding area, and they're able to come and stay with family while they attend school.
So there's no boarding at the school.
Not right now. We're still renting our academic facilities, and we've got a long-term vision. We've got land and a long-term vision to build eventually a full campus.
Oh, you do have land.
But right
How much land do you have?
We have 11 acres.
That's not bad.
Yeah. So what I'm interested in, like, what was the impetus to begin the school with all the other needs that I'm sure, like you had just talked about being aware of, like why a school, and just I'm interested in that. What led you to that?
I'm a development person. And by that, I mean, there are people that do relief work. There are people that do, charity work, meeting basic needs. Lots of people that that come to Africa or are in Africa looking at things like clean water and food and stuff like that. And that is great work. Being a development person, though, means that my goal for any given community, whether it's a church community, a local church, a village, a town, is really resilience. Because the thing is, today the challenge may be clean water. Tomorrow the challenge is going to be maternal health. The day after that, the challenge is going to be the fact that we've got an addiction problem, a gambling problem with our youth in Tanzania because unemployment's at 75%, and not enough youth have the vision and the skills to figure out their next step in life. And so that's one of the challenges there in Tanzania right now is around employment and economic independence for this group of kids coming up, because Tanzania has 60 million people. 70% of them are under 30 years old. And so there's this massive youth population. The challenges always change. So I can address clean water, but then tomorrow I'm going to have to come back and address something else. Or I can educate somebody on how to address the challenges that come up in their community. And if I educate that person, today they're going to work on clean water, and tomorrow they're going to work on maternal health, and the day after that they're going to work on entrepreneurship and employment, and the day after that they're going to work on counseling and spiritual health. It makes so much more sense to me to say, let's educate these youth and young adults who are coming up into adulthood and coming up into leadership so that they can address the problems in their community. Otherwise, I'm going to address one thing tomorrow, something else is going to pop up. And so it's really kind of a long-term solution to look at and say, they know what the problems are, and we're going to give them the skills and the capacity to figure out the solutions.
That's great.
It is great. It's one of the things we're experimenting with at Chapwood through our foundation is this whole kind of, I don't know exactly how to manage it, but it's investing in loans, these micro loan type things, right? And we're actually starting to actually do some of this in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam. We're just kind of at the beginning of this thing. But that sounds a little bit like it's a whole different way. Like you said, when you go, we dig wells. Like we've given some money to drill wells in the Maasai district, where there's some new and exciting things that are going on there. And we've done things helping, orphanages or provide meals for the schools. But I love the idea of finding a way to invest. It's almost the old adage, it's like, I'm not giving you a fish as much as I'm giving you a fish, but also teaching you how to fish. That old kind of mantra, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a fascinating thing for me as we think about missions. Talk about how you see, I know there's a need for all of it, but how do you see them working together where, like you say, you're providing water or clean water, but at the same time, you're building a generation of people who have the capacity to be dynamic in addressing needs no matter what they will shift to be.
Yeah. And ideally, those things work together. So let's talk about clean water, something we're all familiar with. One of the things some people don't know about clean water is that, and I don't know the exact statistic in Tanzania, but all over Africa, I've heard before, something like 75% of the wells that get put in end up defunct at some point.
75%.
It's pretty high. Now, like I said, I feel like I read that somewhere. I could be wrong, but it is a large percentage, more than 50% for sure.
Yeah.
And it's because wells are put in without plans for maintenance, without plans for upkeep. It's because a lot of times in our charity mindset, we'll go and put a well in, but we don't think about charging for that, because for us, it's a donation. For us, it's something that we want to do out of the goodness of our heart. But if the community that receives that doesn't have a sustainable model for keeping it up, then it comes defunct. I have a friend in Tanzania who runs an organization that does water insurance. So they go put in a well. And this individual who's running this is Kenyan and well-educated, very smart guy. And they go in and they put in wells, and then they charge the community basically a monthly insurance, but they guarantee the upkeep of that well. And so they take money every month, and as soon as it breaks, they provide the parts and the labor because they have the know-how to service that well and make sure that it keeps working. That's a local innovative solution. That's nothing I would have necessarily come up with myself, because my mentality oftentimes going in is, well, let me provide this for you because I see that you need it. But what he's doing is making sure that water is there long term. He's providing employment to the people that work under him, and he's helping the community come up with a solution that they can sustain. Because the difficulty for most of these communities is not the monthly insurance payment. He rarely has trouble collecting that money. The problem is they don't have the $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 up front to get the well put in, but they've got the money to maintain it if they do monthly payments like they do to him. And so that's how you got somebody who grew up in this context and was educated in this context, creating solutions for that context. And that's really how this kind of works together, is that we're hoping our graduates are some of the ones that are going out, that in the future, churches like Chapelwood could partner with one of our graduates and say, we want to plant a church, we want to do a well, we want to do a loan program or loan project. And they know how to do it in a way that makes sense for that context. And you can work with them instead of kind of what we do, if you would work with me, but then in 10, 15 years, I'm gone. And then you got to find somebody else to work with. Well, if they're in that community, they're going to be in that community most of their lives. And you get to work with them and partner with them. And they both have the education to understand what you're saying and the local context and contextual needs to understand what their community is saying. And so I feel like that's where it really works together, is to say that the best thing we can do is build up leadership in that community. And then their solutions may come from within that community, or it may come from an outside partner, but it's still being driven from within that community.
That's great. So what kind of is your fundraising for Wesley College where you are now? What are the dreams for what it looks like, for what the next steps are, and what kind of funding will you need to make that happen?
Yeah. A lot of it is really about getting students into the classrooms. That's our big focus. That's what we're there for. That's our main purpose. And so we're in the middle of a $1.5 million campaign to raise 100 scholarships a year for 3 years and get these students through Wesley College in a sustainable way, being able to guarantee that if we give you a scholarship your first year of education, that we're going to be able to support that the entire way through. And we're about halfway through that campaign, both time-wise and dollars-wise. We're about halfway through that campaign. So a lot of what we do is raise scholarships to make sure that we can get students into the classrooms, that they're supported throughout their education. They're not having to drop out because they lose support, something happens to their family. They can find the money for the first payment, but not the year 2 and year 3. And it works. We have an 85% graduation rate. Similar colleges in the U.S., community colleges, which is largely what we're modeled after, on average in the U.S. have about a 32% graduation rate. So we're almost 3 times that in terms of getting our students from start to finish with our programs. The other big thing that we're really trying to do is plan for the future. We want to move Wesley College to where it is less donor dependent, less dependent on the foundation, less dependent on outside support, and are able to generate that more internally. At this point, 60% roughly of our students do pay to attend Wesley College. They pay their tuition, they pay their lodging, they're completely self-funded. And so we want to be able to grow the college to the point where we have enough students to pay for and support most of what's going on. There's always going to be some element, just like universities and colleges here in the U.S., there's always going to be some element of fundraising, but we really want to reduce that as much as possible. And part of that is also going to be getting our own facilities. So right now, it's not a lot, but right now we have to pay rent where we are. And there's a challenge a little bit in the local community and the church in Tanzania saying, we know they're going to be around for the long term because they have their own space and they have their own buildings. There's a little bit of a lack of permanence. And we're only 7-8 years old right now. And so we also have a goal of getting phase 1 done, which could take 1,000 students, could hold 1,000 students. It's going to cost us about 1.3 million. And that would get us into our first phase of our facilities, give us our own place, really show the community, the government, the church that we are around for the long haul, and allow us to add another 750 students before we would have to move on to a phase 2. And so that's our next big step in terms of really moving forward.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
That's great.
Well, it's exciting. I'm excited for you. How much is tuition for one student for a year? Like, what's their tuition rate for 1 year of school?
So not to get complicated.
No, I don't like. My brain doesn't do complicated.
Yeah.
Really?
So $5,000 is tuition, room, and board. So that's what it costs us for a student to attend and have their housing and food paid for while they're at college.
For a year?
$5,000 a year. Mm-hmm.
We need that price point at University of Texas or something like that. That'd be great.
I have had a few parents that are like, "Can we transfer our students?"
Yeah, go to Wesley College in Tanzania.
Go to Wesley College in Tanzania.
Study abroad.
Yeah, 2,500 is just tuition. So that covers their tuition for a year. Those are our scholarship rates. We actually do charge less to our paying students there in Tanzania to keep it affordable. But the scholarships that we raise for our scholarship students reflects the actual cost of education.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It gets a little bit complicated, but
no, it's just like it's just like in the United States. You're
in-state, out-of-state.
Well, yeah, in-state, out-of-state, but also I'm thinking about if you're billing insurance, it's one price, but if you're going to pay cash for a medical procedure, it's going to be a lot less expensive for you to be able to do that. Yeah, it's kind of, I get it. Well, we're really excited about the work you're doing, and Jeff and I are excited about visiting. I think we're going to be there on May the 16th, if I remember the schedule. So how's the weather in May?
You should still be pretty good. So rainy season will maybe be kind of around the corner, so you may have some light rain. Shouldn't be too muddy yet. Should be nice and cool. Tanzania weather is beautiful. Now, you'll be in Dar es Salaam some.
Yeah.
Dar es Salaam is a whole nother animal. I don't promote travel to Dar es Salaam for vacation because it's really hot, and I'm just not that kind of person.
Well, we live in Houston, so we're used to it.
You should be. Yeah, you will definitely be used to it. Very similar, actually, to Houston. Now that I think about it.
And Eric, these guys want to eat as much like street food as possible, and so just load them up with street food. That's what they've been saying.
What do we need to eat?
Yeah. The food is wonderful. The street food I do not recommend.
Okay. They've been talking about it, though.
No, Matt's trying to kill us. He's just mad he's not going. He wants us to die and not come back.
Yeah. I always tell people, do what I say and not what I do. And Tanzania, my stomach is used to it. Yours is not. Because the street food is going to look phenomenal as well. But no, the food is great. You've got to try ugali. You cannot leave Tanzania without trying ugali. It's the staple in country. And it's not bad. It's not the best food.
Ugali?
Ugali. Absolutely have to try ugali. It's
Jeff,
requirement.
make a note.
But if you want some good stuff,
what is ugali?
Ugali is cornmeal and water, and then you boil the water out.
Oh, okay.
And it's just very plain.
Cornbread.
Kind of, yeah.
The porridge?
A Play-Doh version.
A Play-Doh version of
Hey,
it's like a hush puppy.
Something your staple as a kid. Yeah, Play-Doh.
But the pilau is awesome. In Mwanza, the Indian food is actually really, really good.
Really?
I bet.
Yeah.
Well, we're excited about going, and I want to thank you for sharing just a little bit about what's going on there. And What do you? So one of the areas we're going to just real quick is the Maasai district. And my understanding from Bishop Miyambo is it's an area that has traditionally not been reached or I don't know. They've started. I know we've dug one or two wells there, and typically, there's a well, but then there'll be a clinic or a school or a church that usually starts there for the community. What's the Maasai area? Where is that in Tanzania, and what do you know about that area?
Yeah. So the Maasai area you guys are talking about, the Maasai district, is south of Morogoro. So it's kind of in central Tanzania, but a little bit south of that. And the challenge with that is the challenge in growing the church in that area is the Maasai are nomadic people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they don't follow all of kind of the traditional societal things of sending their kids to school sometimes, or of really having long-term permanent community residences where you could plant a church and do something with that. It's really about family structure and relationships. They also have traditionally been very closed off to outsiders because they want to protect their way of life. And that's not just outsiders like you and I, but also sometimes the Tanzanian government. One of the reasons that particular Maasai community is where they are is because of some forced migration that took place a long time ago, moving them out of some of the places that they would have traditionally been, and creating national parks and creating other things that the government wanted to have there instead. And so it does tend to be an underdeveloped, underreached community because of several of those things. What the United Methodist Church, I feel like, has done really, really well is find leaders who are receptive to the gospel, find leaders with a very clear call to ministry, and then educated them. And so instead of trying to send people into that community from outside and fail, they've instead found some people in that community that God has really clearly called and have trained them up as ministers and as church leaders, and then allowed them to figure out, what does a church look like in this community? What does discipleship look like in this community? What does a Christian family look like in this community? And that's what has really been successful for them.
It's amazing. It sounds like first century evangelism, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
There's much more of a movement type presence to what's going on with the Maasai than even some of the other United Methodist districts around Tanzania.
That's great. That's wonderful. I'm just looking forward to being there and sharing some time with our brothers and sisters and just seeing a place I've never been before.
You will love it. Tanzania is beautiful. The landscape is only matched by how warming and hospitable, welcoming the people are.
I expressed my own ignorance. I never knew until I pulled up on the map Dar es Salaam, Zanzibar. There's like rock song about Zanzibar, right? Like I didn't know Zanzibar was an island off of Tanzania. It's apparently like resort areas and stuff. We're not going there, by the way, Jeff, but maybe next time.
It's a big resort area. It's where Fred Mercury was born.
Freddie Mercury was born in Zanzibar.
Was born on Zanzibar.
Really?
That's a little known trivia today.
Look at that.
So at the end of the year, we do a trivia contest, things that you learn on Pod Have Mercy. That will be one. We'll add that one to the list. Anything else to share with us, Eric, before we say goodbye?
Just a thank you. I have appreciated my welcome at Chapelwood when I've been there before. I've really enjoyed sharing with Sunday school classes, getting to know more about the foundation work through Scott, including some of the stuff done right after the floods in Houston. I was actually talking a little bit about that with my church. I pastor a small church here in Clarksville, Tennessee. And we were talking about community outreach and responses, and I was sharing with them some of what you all did right after the Houston flood and the work you all did in that area. So I'm just excited to get to come in and share some with you all, and I've been admiring the ministry at Chapelwood for a while. So
well, we're excited to be in partnership with you and share some commonality with Tanzania. That's an exciting thing to do. Yeah, we're gonna share with our folks too. One of the things I'm going to reach out to some folks to help us financially. Maybe we can do something for some of these groups, especially the ones that we're going to visit. And our hope, too, is to document a lot of this so we can start building bridges of relationships. That's important for us, that when we are supporting global or national or even local partners, to have relationships with them, not just about sending money, but to build friendships and build community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you, Eric, for being with us. Anything else, Matt?
No, I'm excited.
Thanks so much for joining us, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Absolutely.
Appreciate all the work
it.
you do. God bless.
I'm going to work on my resentment now. I really want to go.
Matt, I just want to apologize.
Yeah, you don't want to apologize. You're apologizing out of your
that
eight.
you're not going with us to
Yeah.
Tanzania.
I'm so sorry your feelings are hurt, Matt.
No, well, what is it they say? Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
I'm sorry that what I said bothered you.
Offended you.
I'm
If
sorry.
anything I did.
If I did anything to offend you,
that-
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you were offended.
I'm sorry you were offended. That's my favorite form of apology. It's so
sorry that you
healing.
were offended.
It's going to be great. I just think when I think about the body of Christ as a network, and that there's all these relationships y'all are going to just walk into because of our shared faith, right? I mean, it's amazing.
I'm excited about that too. But back to the real issue. The reason you're not going is because if I don't make it back,
Yeah, right.
you get the keys
To what?
to the whole thing.
Your Volvo?
Yeah, the whole thing.
I get the keys.
You will be senior pastor. Now he's going to call a Tanzania and say,
Hey,
when you
feed
see him,
them
we take him out.
No, that's when I'm like, no street food, dudes.
That's right.
Well, this is that's good. I'm excited. We met with our serving team staff, and I'm going to be meeting soon with our global ministry team of lay leaders. And so we're really just thinking about how we move forward, with the relationships that we have, and it's exciting. I think sometimes when you're opening the doors to some new relationships too, sometimes agencies or groups that you support, they go through life cycle changes like everyone else, and so it's good. I love the idea of, like you said, building community across the globe.
Yeah.
So that you have relationships, like deep relationships. I mean, the thought of working with children who then go to college, who then start businesses or
100%.
things or ministries in their country that help, and that you can kind of walk alongside of them through that journey.
Yes.
That's to me is like, that was such a real powerful way of thinking about doing mission and ministry.
Absolutely. And to realize that, I mean, that's a massive country that has a Wesleyan footprint in it, and that it's good. It's good to know what's going on with our brothers and sisters all over the world.
Yeah. Well, I reached out also, like, we're going to have, I know we're going to have some different topics coming up. We're going to talk about Dietrich Bonhoeffer soon.
Oh.
And Matt's really excited about that because he used to teach Bonhoeffer.
I love that guy.
I'm just going to defer to you. I've read Bonhoeffer and studied Bonhoeffer, but you're going to be the expert on that. So anyway, that'll be good. And then also, I reached out to Bishop Miyambo again since we're going. So I'm hoping we can coordinate a time to
That'd be
Zoom
awesome.
with him again before we go, so he can talk to us about same thing, Tanzania and mission.
That's a relationship that's borne a ton of fruit.
Oh yeah,
That dude, I like him.
he's great.
He's a good man.
He just sent me pictures. They just were in Burundi, and they had just went through elections for new bishops in Africa. On the continent of Africa, I mean, Bishop Miyambo has shared this with me before. Like, he lost a child to malaria. Like, the United Methodist denomination was one of the most important institutions that help eradicate malaria and childhood death because of our NETS campaign.
I remember that.
And it's just amazing when you think about the impact that you can have when you leverage people together.
Yes.
And that's the power of a denomination. Institutions, I didn't give or take an institution, but man, when you get them aligned and you've got power and resource, it does some amazing things.
And I think institutions at the end of the day are about like the connections you're making with this bishop, right? I mean, institutions as terms of names don't mean much until you humanize it with these relationships and you're like, oh, I'm going to go see my friend.
Well, and the thing about Monday now is, years ago when I met him, he was kind of the junior bishop. He just gotten elected.
Junior bishop. They had.
Well, I mean, he was like, there were a bunch that had been bishops a lot longer. Well, now they just elected a new crop of. He's kind of like getting to be the godfather now. I don't say godfather. I mean, you know what I mean.
The goat.
Yeah, the goat.
Kind of the senior guy over there now. Anything else, Jeff?
It's great.
All right. Well, thank you all. This is a lot of a good. If you want to make a donation to Tanzania, reach out to us. Let us know. You can check out at Chapwood and just mark it Tanzania.
Did I tell
Or
you?
call us and let us know.
In 6 months, I'm going to be going as a missionary to Hawaii.
Are you really?
I'm going to be visiting the United Methodists in Hawaii there. They've got this amazing.
Hey, are we invited?
No, I'm sorry. You guys aren't invited to that. I've connected with the bishop over there who's a surfer.
Oh, yeah.
And he has a surf ministry off
You do
of,
look like a surfer.
And so I'm going to be going and just kind of supporting Bishop Chad there. And Bishop Chad he's a great guy.
Now?
Yeah, so you guys can also, support that. I need some new board shorts, and I'm going for a longboard this time.
Yeah.
So
I got you.
just
we'll do what we can to help you. I think there might be some mission money to help
Thank you.
Bishop Chad. All right. Hey, we got to be done. I'm John Stevens.
I'm Matt Russell.
And this is Pod Have Mercy.